He's someone who's also been part of he had met with investigators in Jack Smith's investigation. His name is on here. And David James Shaver. That, I believe, is the top former Republican official. He was in a campaign fundraising role that is also part of this and was someone who was part of that fake elector scheme involved in that. And so those are the names that I'm reading off this sheet right now that we see. Several different charges. We're waiting to see which ones, of course, apply to which people. But I mean, the first name that stood out to me, a lot of them are obvious, but Mark Meadows being on there.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Because
with
this, the White House chief of staff, and one of the things that's interesting about that is that there was no suggestion in the federal indictment of Donald Trump and 6 unnamed co-conspirators, 4 of whom at least are in this indictment as well and named. That's Giuliani, Eastman, Chesebro, and Clark. But Mark Short, Vice President Pence's chief of staff, told me that Mark Meadows, Trump's chief of staff of the White House, was the ringleader of the whole conspiracy, and he suspected that because Meadows was not a co-conspirator in the federal indictment, that he was cooperating. So it is interesting indeed that Mark Meadows is indicted in this state indictment.
Yeah, and he was the one who, with Georgia in particular, Jake, he was the one who went down. He was making phone calls to Georgia officials. He was the one who went down to Georgia to visit an election audit site. He was the one who was on the phone when Trump called Brad Raffensperger in that infamous call just a few days before January 6th. He wasn't actually in the room with Trump, but he was listening in another room when the White House switchboard called him in. He is someone that Georgia officials, when you talk to them, they echo what Mark Short told you. They say that he is someone who was arranging a lot of the calls, a big part of this. He is someone who fought testifying in this, as did others when they were initially investigating this over the last 2.5 years. So it's just really notable to see his name in here, to see other Trump campaign officials, people like Mike Roman, who's not a household name, but he is.
Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and John Eastman part of this indictment. As many as, a 41-count indictment against Trump, 18 others in total. These are the ones that we're putting up on the screen that I just read to you. And so this is just, we've been waiting now for since we came on the program at 9 o'clock tonight, and Meadows has been indicted. We have John Eastman has been indicted. Rudy Giuliani has been indicted. And I would assume some of the predictable names. We now have less than a minute of our coverage left. I'm going to give you the last word tonight, Mr. Speaker.
Imagine if this had been applied to Al Gore's supporters when he contested Florida in 2000. Imagine the amount of money these people will have to spend to hire.
For all of whom you mentioned before. Next page, Sean Micah Treasure Still, Stephen Cliffguard Lee, Harrison William Prescott Floyd, Trevion Cuddy, I apologize, Sidney Powell, who Donald Trump himself referred to behind closed doors as crazy with her conspiracy theories, Kathleen Latham, Scott Hall, and Misty Hampton, aka Emily Misty Hayes. Do you know who that is?
She's actually a very interesting one. She's not a name that most people recognize. She was the Coffee County election supervisor. So that story that CNN broke yesterday about those efforts to access voting machines and voting software in Coffee County, Georgia, she is someone who played a role in that. And I believe, Jake, if memory is serving me right, that Mark Meadows, when he went down to Georgia, he met Misty Hampton or somehow got her number and went back to the White House with it, and that was someone that they were on the phone with very quickly after that, obviously trying to get access to the voting software in Coffee County.
Yeah, when Meadows went down to Georgia. The Misty Hampton Coffee County story is interesting, and just to remind folks of that story, which CNN broke yesterday, and Caitlin, you'll jump in if I get any of this wrong, but it seems as though Coffee County election officials
told that news conference will take place in about 19 minutes. Meantime, let's get you live outside the courthouse to Matt Finn. He is in Atlanta with the breaking allegations on this. Matt, what do we know?
Hi, Trace. We are looking through the indictment documents right now, but they do read that Donald Trump and some of his associates, including Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows, have been listed and charged in this indictment. There's a long list of various charges, including racketeering, false statements, and solicitation of violation of an oath by a public officer. We're reading through this right now. We'll be able to update you much more throughout the coming hour or two. Throughout the day, there was a lot of anticipation or questions about who might be named in this indictment, if any of Donald Trump's associates would be listed. We now know that many of them are. There's a long list, including some of his former attorneys, including Jenna Ellis. We're now waiting on that press conference from the Fulton County District Attorney, Fannie Willis, that is likely going to give us much more information and insight into this very long investigation centered around alleged misconduct and criminal activity on behalf of the former president and his associates regarding the 2020 general election here in the state of Georgia. Now, earlier today, we saw a lot of activity outside of the courthouse. We saw several witnesses coming in or out of the courthouse, including Georgia's former Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. He testified today, and as he left the courthouse, he told us that this is an opportunity for the Republican Party to turn a corner. He called it the GOP 2.0. One of our producers asked him how he felt the testimony today and the indictment would impact Donald Trump's 2024 presidential election campaign, and he gave no answer to that. I also talked to a journalist who left the courthouse a short while ago. His name is George Cheedy. He sat inside of the courthouse all day long today. He was doing some live tweeting, and I asked him if he felt like this process was sped up today, and he says he felt like it was, because initially he was supposed to come in and testify tomorrow, but then he was called in today. He felt like this was speeded up. And earlier today, as we have been reporting, there were some documents that surfaced on the Fulton County website. One of those documents appeared to be the same exact indictment that we're looking at tonight as far as the charges related to Donald Trump. And those documents began circulating and being reported on because it looked as if it was an indictment against Donald Trump. Well, then all of a sudden the Fulton County clerk's office came out and said, no, those are fictitious documents. Don't pay attention to them. Well, now we're looking at something rather similar tonight. So that event kind of raises the question of whether this process was sped up today, because somehow the indictment against Donald Trump was posted on the Fulton County website much earlier today. So we are trying to kind of sort out how that may have impacted the process here at the Fulton County website. The big thing right now, Trace, is of course we're waiting from the press conference from
the anchor of this is what happened in Georgia. But, as you read through this, they're listing some of the other places where, and people who are involved in some of these in other states as well. So certainly for us, when we were thinking how this case was going to come forward, we were thinking that, they would limit themselves to just the discrete things that happened in Georgia. And from reading this, it appears what they've done is they've gone much broader than we first anticipated.
And we're showing an image of the county clerk who's handing out some documents, I think, to those at the courthouse, to reporters and others. Evan, we're expecting to hear from Fannie Willis any moment. Do you have any sense of how much detail she will go into?
We don't yet, Anderson. We do know that one of the things that obviously she has to be mindful of is the fact that this is a case that's now in the hands of the court.
Indicted co-conspirators in the federal case that are now facing state charges. So this is a really good development if you're Fannie Willis, but also if you're Jack Smith, because this puts so much more pressure on those people to make a deal with the government. So that's to me the real sort of shot across the bow here, not just because you have these really serious charges against Donald Trump, but you have so many levers to pull if you are at the state and federal level with respect to all of these other people.
And Andrew, we knew from open source reporting about how these investigations had gone forward, the kinds of witnesses they had called, the kinds of subpoenas they had issued, that Jack Smith and Fani Willis were covering some of the same ground. There was a long, detailed section in the federal indictment from Special Counsel Jack Smith that covered Trump's alleged actions in Georgia. As you've been pointing out, there was that list of unindicted co-conspirators, which pointed at some of the names we're now seeing in this Georgia indictment, Trump lawyers who allegedly participated with him in those efforts. We've also had Fani Willis, though, say explicitly that she did not coordinate anything with Jack Smith's office, that she and the special counsel at the federal level have not been talking to each other, either in terms of their investigation or in terms of coordinating their actions in bringing public-facing actions like these, filing this indictment. Is that still seem both appropriate to you, and will that now get complicated by the kind of crossover that you're describing, in which some of these lawyers charged at the state level may now want to cooperate with prosecutors?
So to the extent that their charges are against people like Rudy Giuliani, who is alleged to be an unindicted co-conspirator, no, it's sort of, he may face federal charges and state court charges, but they seem aligned. It's just more pressure. Where I see that there may be a real conflict is Mark Meadows. If Mark Meadows is cooperating at the federal level, well, he was just charged at the state level, or if he was given immunity at the federal level to give information, but he didn't admit to what he has now been charged with at the state level, that is going to be some tension between these federal and state charges. There's also the possibility that he didn't fully come clean to the federal investigators, and this will be a useful wake-up call, as you might say, to him and to his lawyer as to needing to face the music.
And Rachel, just to jump in on 3 new facts we've gleaned. Rachel, number 1, we've heard a lot about unindicted co-conspirators in the Jack Smith case. This has a bunch of people charged. We read that off. This also has listed unindicted co-conspirators. They're often under Georgia state law referred to as individual with a number, or unindicted co-conspirator, comma, individual, and then it'll say that person's identity is known to the grand jury. So it'll be very interesting, and to build on what Andrew was saying about the process, it'll be very interesting to learn about a new crop of people who may have cooperated, or at least under duress and legal obligation testified to the grand jury. A second fact we've just gleaned, there is multiple acts in furtherance of the RICO conspiracy that relate to accessing voting data. We discussed this earlier tonight. Nicole was discussing it. Very, very striking, because that gets you all beyond just lying to legislators. For example, I'm just reading here from Act 150. It says that an unindicted co-conspirator, quote, unlawfully accessed data copied from Dominion voting systems equipment in the Coffee County Board of Elections and Registration Office. It goes on to name others who did that. It names an attorney associated with Sidney Powell. It says that happened in Georgia, and it also makes reference to getting data or trying to get data unlawfully from the state of Michigan. Yeah. So that's interesting. And the third point I wanted to say, we talked about the intersection of this and other cases. Well, obviously, she said she's moved independently. I see that this DA takes a broad view of her ability to prosecute acts in furtherance of the conspiracy that lie to other, even sovereign investigations. So we see